In this video, I want to talk to you about the Crochet Thinlit dies by Tim Holtz and Sizzix. There are 4 dies in this set, 2 different styles, and then 2 sizes of each of those styles. To cut these Thinlits, you need an adapter. You need the Thinlit adapter, and you're also going to need 2 cutting plates. And as you can see here, I prefer with an intricate die like this to use the chrome cutting plate, and I also put them on an angle because there are rollers, and you get a better cut if you have them on an angle because the rollers can attach. You also need to make sure that if you're using a vagabond that it's going in the right direction, and then go ahead and run the dies through your vagabond. And as they come out the other side, when you take them off, you'll be able to tell if they cut through all the way. Now this first one cut easily through, and forgive me if I only had one hand, I was holding the camera with the other, but you can see that it clearly cut through, especially if you turn it on the other side. Okay, the second one took a little bit to pull it out, but as you can see, if you look again, you can see that it cut through all the way onto the back side. I'll just need to use that Sizzix poking tool to go ahead and get it out of the die. This one seems to be a little bit more difficult to get out, so if you look closely, you can see it hasn't cut all the way through. It's going to need to be run through again. And that's the nice thing about the fact that it sticks in the die, is that I can just lay it back down and run it through again. And this fourth one did cut perfectly, so it will just need to be taken out. Now, I decided to cut some on a thicker craft stock, so I needed the same adapters. I put it on an angle again, and as I'm running it through, you're going to notice that because this craft stock is much thicker than the Distress Mixed Media heavy stock, it may not have cut through as easily as it did with the heavy stock. And so again, this one, as I'm pulling it, and as you can see, the die cuts are staying in the paper, and that's because on the ends of these, and if you look closely now, you can see that they didn't cut all the way through, so I did need to run them back through. And I decided to run them through twice just to make sure that they cut. But you can see that the die cuts stuck in the paper, and that's because on the ends, there is a little bit of an area that will allow you to be able to attach it end to end, which I'm going to show you next. And so you have to actually kind of cut the ends out if you use a larger piece of paper than the die. And after going through again 2 more times, you can see those all cut perfectly. Here I wanted to demonstrate to you how to make a longer piece of lace by cutting it twice end to end. So you need to begin with a longer piece of paper and then run the die through once on one side of the paper. And as you can see, I didn't cut it off the edge because I wanted that bit of paper to hold the die cut in place, so that when I lay the die at the end to cut the second piece, it won't move around and shift. And as you can see with me laying the dies end to end here, you can see how closely they line up, so that when you turn the dies over, you can see there's just that little area there where they're going to attach. Now, once I got mine lined up, I wanted them to stay in place, and this is probably overkill, but that's just my personality. So what I did is I used some low-tack tape from Judykins. This is the 1 inch. It actually comes in 3 sizes, and there's a 1/4 inch, a 1/2 inch, and then the 1 inch. And then what I did is I put it across so that it would not only touch the chrome plate, but it would also hold the paper and the die in place when I ran it through. Now you can see that it's pretty close to perfect, just a little tiny bit off, but you won't be able to tell that. And then on this one, it lined up perfectly. Once you cut the pieces, you need to get them out of the paper. And if you cut them on a piece that's a little bit longer than they are, you're going to have to release them. The 2 larger lace dies usually release fairly simply, kind of like this, as you can see, especially if you have the paper being held together on the ends. And if they don't, there are these little holes on the die that you can use the poker tool and just kind of push through and gently nudge the paper out of the die. And then if you use a piece that's longer than the die and you aren't going to extend the piece into a longer piece of lace, you just need to take your snips and you need to just cut off the ends there where it is attached to the larger piece of paper. And then I usually just kind of use my fingers, my fingernail a little bit. I just run it along the back, and generally a lot of the paper will just fall out on its own. And then I go ahead and get the poker tool and I punch out the rest. This goes fairly quickly, and it's actually kind of relaxing to do this. I do have one of those Sizzix brush tools with the mat, but I almost never get that out. I usually just find it easier just to go ahead and take care of the little bits with the poker tool. It's just faster to me. And there you can see how quickly you can just go ahead and poke through those, and how beautifully that die just cuts through there and just makes it look like lace. And I really love the way it makes kind of a beveled edge to really make it look like lace on there. I wanted to show how that sometimes when you're using a thicker material or one of the smaller die cuts, that sometimes the paper will stick in the die, and what you need to do is turn it over first, make sure that it cut all the way through, which you can tell. And then if you want, this is a technique you can use if you have these laying around. I have cats, so I have a lot of these, and you can kind of run it across the back and it will pull some of the paper out. I generally do this when the paper's still stuck in the die. And then what you do is you turn it over and you want to use the poking tool and you want to poke through the round holes, and that's going to press the paper out of the die. And you just kind of gently want to work until it starts to release enough that you can start pulling it. And there you can see it's starting to come out. And so I will usually turn it over a little bit, go ahead and pull. And you don't want to pull too hard, you just pull gently until it gives some resistance, and then you turn it back over and poke through some more of the holes. And I found that that center one that I just poked through often will be one of the best releases on this particular die. But you also want to do these along the bottom scalloped edge, because the thicker paper will sometimes stick in there, and if you don't poke through those, it will have a tendency to tear a little bit. But as you can see, I just gently work my way down, and as you poke through there, it just will pop out, and then you can release the rest of the paper. Here's some of the finished crochet pieces that I have. This one is Distress Mixed Media Heavy Stock, and I've just colored it with a little bit of Distress ink in tea dye. So it has kind of a reddish tea color to it. This one is also Distress Mixed Media Heavy Stock, but it is colored with one of my favorites, Brushed Corduroy, just kind of on the edges. This one is another favorite, Pumice Stone. And for some reason it didn't focus on here, but you can see that it's just a lovely light gray with a little bit of brown here and there. These two are very similar, but this one was colored with Scattered Straw, which is a really beautiful yellow. And this one is with Antique Linen, and you can see that they're very similar. Just a little bit more yellow with the Scattered Straw. All of the pieces on this side are craft stock. I went over the paper originally with some Picket Fence Distress paint, and that's what kind of gives it the pickled look. But then I went over the other pieces with Distress ink as well. This one I went over with Pumice Stone, so it gave it a little bit of a gray tone. This one with Frayed Burlap, so it's kind of a little bit more of a distressed wood color. And then this one with some of the Distress tea dye. These pieces, I just wanted to show you how beautiful they are when you cut two of the dies side by side to make those longer pieces of lace. They can be used on a layout or something like that. These are some samples. I used the Sparkle Alcohol ink cardstock on this card, and I just colored it with a little bit of Latte alcohol ink. On this card, this is Distress Mixed Media Heavy Stock that's just been colored with a little bit of brushed corduroy. And this is one that I've already posted on my blog, but I used it on an etc. tag and then covered it with a layer of paint just to give it kind of an interesting background texture. I think this is a beautiful die, and I hope that you find this helpful when you start to make your own paper crochet.